Welcome back. Today we're going to be working on the tie bolts for going between the skid rails to hold the skid together, and we'll be working on the cargo eye bolts. So we'll be taking an eye bolt like this and putting a ring through it here. Also, we'll look at a few parts, so stay tuned and enjoy the video. Okay, while all those eye bolts cool down, we'll talk about a part. This is what regulates the fuel to the engine. Some people call it a carburetor. It's actually not. We'll talk about that in a minute. Sits on the engine just like this. This bolts to the cylinder. Air intake comes through here, and it has this little hat. It's often called a hat. Sits on here, keep the rain out. Has a port on the side that can pull hot air off of the engine, and some settings here for that. And then this is a starting bowl. Fill this with gasoline. You have a needle valve for starting the engine, and it has a butterfly at the bottom that controls the speed off of a governor. So in that respect, it's a carburetor, because carburetors have butterflies, but it does not have a float and a bowl for holding fuel for the engine. It has this overflow here. It pumps fuel up into here, it overflows into this side and back down to the tank. So it's called a mixer, not a carburetor, because it does not have a float and a bowl. So these Mogul engines ran off of kerosene, which was 4 cents a gallon. It's a cheaper fuel at that time. Gasoline was higher refined and was 8 cents a gallon. So if you could, you ran kerosene. The problem with the kerosene then was that it was lower refined fuel. That's why it was cheaper. But it also had bigger hydrocarbons, so oily components, and it also had lighter hydrocarbons that were even lighter than gasoline and therefore more volatile. So to keep under heavy load, to keep those light volatiles from igniting prematurely, you had a water injection system, and that's what this is here. This would pull water out of the hopper of the engine and inject that water into the cylinder while it was running. It did two things. One, it cooled the fuel charge so it didn't pre-detonate. And it also created power. When the ignition happened, the water would turn into steam, expands 3,000 to 1 in volume, and added power. So you could run this in several positions, anywhere from off to about a 1-to-1. So if you burned a gallon of kerosene, you would run a gallon of water through there. You just wanted to be careful and turn this water off and let it run for a few minutes before you shut it off. Otherwise, that water would condense in the cylinder and it would stick the piston rings. The next morning when you try to run the engine, it'd be stuck. So that's the carburetor. I call it a carburetor sometimes, but it's actually a mixer. And I've got something else to look at here. Okay, so we got a couple of nuts here to look at. They are both 5/8 nuts. The one on the left is what I call a heavy pattern. It's referred to as a heavy pattern nut. It's bigger. The one on the right is the one that came on the eye bolts that I got in the mail. It's a standard nut that would be used today you get in the hardware store. It's obviously smaller. It's because it's hardened. It's a higher grade material, so for strength it doesn't need to be very big. The one on the left is a bigger one. That was the way they had to make them to get the strength out of them. So this one here is a 1 16th wrench size. The one on the right is a 15 16th. So when you hear me say something is a heavy pattern, what I'm referring to is that it's this larger size, either a bolt or a nut. In this case, these are equal. They'll both do the same thing, but one is just larger because it's a heavy pattern. Thanks for watching today. Got the eye bolts expanded out, put the loops in them, closed them back up, and got the bolts made for holding the skid together. We got one more part to make, which is the two rails that go underneath the long wooden rails of the skid. That's for the skid to slide around on, so it's not sliding on the wood. So next video we'll make those, and then we're ready to put it together. Tina says like and subscribe, and thanks for watching today.